Hello and welcome to the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachie Avil, back again on a Monday morning, ready for your commute to work, to school, or however you listen to us on your mornings, getting to wherever you need to be. Jacob Stevens, hello to you. Off another Friday night in Coopers, you must be buzzing.
Yeah, and another win for Adelaide at home, which is kind of a return to normal after what was a weird situation last year where Adelaide couldn't win at home. But no, it was a good night out. Weather was a bit wild, rain, wind, all sorts, but it was genuinely a pretty good game of football as well. I thought both teams played pretty well. Adelaide come away with the win, and then, to back that up with just a full weekend of just fantastic football. It's been good.
And two debuts in a row on the podcast. I don't think we've ever had that before. But Declan Archer, welcome. Pure podcast listeners might not know who you are, but potentially some fans of the YouTube channel. You were on our one-on-one series the other day for the Melbourne Derby, and we thought people were loving the reaction to you. So we thought we'd bring you in, especially with the occasion of the Melbourne Derby as well, which went pretty good for your boys in City Blue.
Yeah, mate. Happy to be on. Can't wait. Really enjoyed the one-on-one, so happy to jump in this again. Voice is a bit rusty though. After a bit of terrace last night, but yeah, lots of singing, lots of yelling, a lot of beer. So no, it'll be good to. I'm probably not the best talking voice, but no, happy to be on.
We had a game last year, one of the original rivalries in Melbourne, and Jacob travelled over for the game. He was in the away end.
Yeah.
And I usually sit with my dad. We have tickets on the west side. But just for one game, let's go sit in the south end so I can see Jacob and point at him and, flip him off when things get heated. And that was what? It was like a 4-3 game or something stupid like that. 5-3. Oh, brilliant.
It's great.
So, we do like the banter from the different ends, but it's good to have you on. But really, there is no other place to start today than the Kiwi Derby on Saturday afternoon. Jason Pine said it best as the moment was unfolding in front of him. I challenge you to find better sporting theatre than this. Just the way it's set up in the final minutes, we're going to, for some reason, briefly skip over the fact that, Chiefy's high line was undone within 28 seconds and Eze banged one to get it back within 10 minutes. But the way the final 20 minutes of this game shaped up, 2 red cards for Auckland, which, Steve Corica did his best job to try and refute post-match. For me, they're both pretty clear red cards. And then it ends up being around 20 minutes, including injury time, of Auckland down to 9 men and Wellington just pressing, trying to find the equalising goal. You got Callan Elliott with the little header to block Alex Rufer's shot from distance, and Luke Brooks-Smith and his kind of deflected header that just kind of almost trickles in the perfectly wrong spot between Alex Rufer and the goal. The drama and the build-up and the event, it was a really good continuation to what we saw last year, Jacob.
Oh, it was perfect. The atmosphere looked great as well. Huge, of course, Auckland travelling contingent, which was good to see. And just a really fun game of football, right? It was 100 minutes of end-to-end just action, and Auckland, obviously, after 2 red cards, you're going to shut up shop a little bit. But the defending, the absolute last ditch efforts that they put in, like you said, the Callan Elliott little header thing that he just managed to get it over the bar, and it was awesome to watch. Obviously, it would be disappointing from a Wellington perspective to have that 2-man advantage, even just a 1-man advantage for half the game, and not be able to claw your way back into it. But I think that this is just kind of everything that we wanted to see from this kind of game, right? Is these two teams going absolutely at each other. There were a few moments as well where, it all kind of just falls apart and breaks into a scuffle and a melee, and, you're getting, red cards and yellow cards flying around everywhere, big challenges. I thought the refereeing was actually, very, very good. There were a lot of strong challenges in the game, but he knew kind of when to go one way or the other and say, no, that's too much. And I think that, kind of giving a little bit of leeway in these big games, it just adds to everything that's going on the pitch, right? When you kind of, you're not letting more things go than normal, but you're maybe just not calling things as quickly, and you're just letting it play out a little bit. And I thought it was great to see. Like you said, can't be too angry with the 2 red cards. I think the second one, who was it that was sent off for that one? My mind's now
Robertson.
Robertson. it's a red card. And I think they said this on commentary, like, it's a red card. There was no intent in it, but you can't be catching somebody up at the knee with your studs, right? Like, yes, okay, he slipped and he didn't mean it, but at the end of the day, he still did it. So it's like you kind of have to take that. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly what Corica is so, angry about with those two decisions, especially considering you got the win too. But no, it was an awesome game of football.
We saw some really weird press interactions between Corica and Italiano this week. I'm not sure that the derby hype of this game has been great. I'm not sure if the two coaches have absolutely nailed the kind of back and forth of it so far. But what do you make, Deck, of just the rivalry as a whole? It's the fourth game. I honestly feel really sorry for Wellington fans. Like they had last year, the first derby was pretty close until the two late goals, and they didn't really stand a chance too much in the other two. And you get to this point, new season, new chance, and you come so close, and you probably should have equalised late on. But yet, it's Auckland 4-0, but you just got to find a way to keep bringing those fans back.
Yeah, I think good derbies need storylines, and we were talking, like we saw really good foundations last year, but it was more like, what do we, apart from the geographical, standpoint, what we'll probably need a bit of something, and this derby felt like that, like you said, the coaches going back and forth, and then Auckland flying in with a couple leg breakers, or at least one leg breaker, and then Corica, somehow defending that on the touchline, like it creates villains, and it creates feeling, like now those Wellington fans, what are they going to think of Corica and the Wellington players getting stuck in and push and shove, like now you've got the geographical standpoint, but there's a storyline here now. You've got the Auckland who are doing that side kind of stuff, and I've got the wood over them, and Wellington that they'll be feeling that, to play effectively 20 minutes at the end there with 10 minutes added on to not get that when it felt like it was inevitable that they would. Now guaranteed the next time those two play each other, it's not just going to be like, Kiwi Derby, they're going to replay those videos, and they're going to replay the challenges, and the fans are going to be up for it, and like there's a real feeling there now. Not saying there wasn't before, but now we're proper. I remember like if all goes how it should in 10 years time, like this is what those Wellington fans are going to talk about. It's what Auckland fans are going to talk about. Oh, do you remember this derby and things like that? So as a neutral, it's great to have, because you could, the more really passionate bookmark games we've got on the A-League calendar, the better. And it's really good for the Kiwi fans to have that as well. It feels like for a long time, they're just kind of outside. You've got that one, for a long time, that one team in New Zealand, and then Auckland came in and really, dominated last year, and now they've got a really great derby. So awesome for those guys up there, and as a neutral, I love watching it, so long may it continue.
So they actually don't have to wait that long until the next derby. It's the 6th of December back in Auckland, so less than a month away for all this to come. But I just wonder, like, I don't know if you could pick out a specific moment. Maybe it's the Rogerson red card, Jacob, but in terms of this game being a defining moment for the rivalry, I don't think it's quite there, but is it almost like a Kevin Muscat, John Cosmina, ball rolling under the plastic chair, bit of a shirt front, bit of a neck hold as well? It's one of those moments, as Dex say, people will keep pointing back to it and pointing to that moment.
Yeah, and the kind of the point at which the teams are fully bought into it, because I don't think there's any denying that the fans have bought into it from the get-go, right? We've seen it all over social media with the fans from the first derby last season. It's been clearly very heated, but yeah, you're right, and it kind of echoes that Cosmina Muscat situation where it's like the fans have really bought into it. It just needs one on-field thing to happen for it to really just kick on for the two clubs as well. And I mean, the clubs have bought into it, don't get me wrong, but I mean, yeah, for this to be kind of the baseline now moving forwards, right? It's I don't think it's quite that same level, but I think that so early on, in its history, to have such a kind of a big kind of contentious moment where it all kind of boils over so quickly. I think it goes to show that, this is trending in the right direction already. And like Dex says, that's just awesome to see, from a new perspective, and from a perspective of New Zealand football as well. I mean, they were saying it also on commentary, Piney saying, that they've been, begging for this kind of a fixture in New Zealand for decades now, right? Like they've never had this opportunity, and now it's come, and everyone's giving it their all. And I think that's all you can ask for, really, right? Is everybody buys into it and makes it the best that it can be. And I think the only, I suppose, downside to this one is that Wellington didn't get a result, right? I think that would have just taken it to another level, because all of a sudden now it's not just, Auckland are going to win it. It's a case of Wellington got one back now, and it now goes back to Auckland. It's like you're resetting the slate for this season. But no, it just awesome to see. And yeah, these moments, I like what Declan says, where it's like, yeah, you're going to talk about it in the future, where you'll be like, oh, I was there, in the stands. I watched it live, and you're going to have your perspective of it, whether you're an Auckland fan or a Wellington fan, going, oh, that was the most undeserved red card of all time, or, oh, how is that not 3 red cards? Like, it's like, just those little things that's just going to continue to push on and kind of become part of the lore of this fixture. It's awesome.
Looking forward to the next one. On the teams themselves, Auckland obviously were Auckland. They do what they do. They were very solid. I thought Callan Elliott came in and did very well, replacing Sakai, which is going to have to get comfortable at doing. But obviously the big question mark is still around the Phoenix. And Chiefy's high line, it was undone twice in this game for the 2 goals, which honestly, and I know he's not going to change the way he wants to play, but this kind of setup plays right into Auckland's hands, the way they're willing to sit back and absorb pressure and then get a team on the counter. It took just 28 seconds for Sam Cosgrove to get the first. I believe he's actually officially credited with the second one as well, despite Jesse Randall being the main guy. Is there a single
angle that shows him actually getting a touch on that ball?
I don't think so. I couldn't see him touch it. But he got the second goal, and this isn't like a surprise, right? It's not supposed to be. This is a game of chess deck where every tactics has trade-offs. It has positives and negatives, and Chiefy spoke a couple of weeks ago about really trying to reinforce to the players what the positives were in terms of retaining possession and holding high pressure possession in the opponent's half, which they do manage to do, and they held 60% of the ball in this game. But constantly now, every week we're seeing it. It is the way teams are scoring goals against them, and eventually as a player, you're going to have to think, well, maybe if we drop a little bit deeper, we stop conceding these goals.
Yeah. I think you summed it up perfectly. I think looking at it, I think when you look at the A-League, you've got a lot of teams who are kind of level, and then you've got your lower teams, and then you've got like your proper upper echelon teams. And I think that you're in the A-League, you're going to play teams enough, and probably the lower to mid teams enough that and Wellington are probably good enough that when you're playing that game style, there's going to be enough that if you want to justify it, you could justify it. But then I think when you come to the bigger question, it's like, when you're playing your really top teams, how's it going to be? How's it going to work? And I think it literally took Auckland 25 seconds to answer that question, which was if you get a player good enough on the ball to play those long balls, and you've got so many good players who can do that in this league, like your Luke Bratton, Juwan Matters, your Caceres, who can kind of just, Leckies and things like that, who can like ping those balls across and kind of dispose that high line, that you're going to create a lot of opportunities. And then, like you said, I think then the question is, well, how do the players respond to that? We're only 3-4 weeks in and we're already asking that question. If this happens every week for the next 11-12 weeks, the reality is it's going to take a toll on the players. The players are going to think of it as like, well, what do we do? Like, how often do we keep buying into this? How many results do they need to get the players to keep buying into this, and when you play that way, it only takes one person to play someone on side and stuff like that. Like, personally, for me, I think the risk outweighs the reward, but also I've seen in football enough now that it's almost common practice for managers to die on their hill about like, this is the way we play, and you see it all the time, and especially in the A-League where you've got no punishment, there's no threat of relegation, so it's like if he wants to die on that hill, he'll die on it. So it's interesting to see, and then I'm also probably more interested to see like not only how patient the players are, but how patient the fans are, and to see if he does adjust it a little bit, because it's almost just, it feels like suicide at times to play that high against good teams. But we'll see if he sticks fat.
I think there's three layers to the whole Chiefy dying on his hill thing. It's, as you say, there's no threat of relegation. He's not going to put the team in a horrible position. Number two is this is a personal view that Ange Postecoglou, sitting at the top of the Australian football psyche at the moment, just kind of filters down towards almost everything that we do in the very I'm going to play my way, that's it. And also the fact that if he gets it wrong, this is Chiefy's last season.
Yeah.
He had a good season, he had a bad season, he got his contract renewed under the condition that he had a good season the one before, and he talked about the fact that he lost himself and he did things last year that he didn't want to do, but he thought he was going to do it for results, and in the end, they never really came. So he said he's going to stick true to himself, and I think we're seeing that play out, but it's, as you say, it's going to be fascinating to see how the players respond to that moving forward. I tell you what, apart from the chaos of that derby in the final 20 minutes, the standout story in the weekend of A-League football for me was Sunday afternoon and just the vibes of A-League football. We had Sydney beating Macarthur 2-0, and then Brisbane 3-0 over Newcastle, but specifically the locations that they were playing at, both forced because of venue unavailability, which we know is a constant issue, but I think we've seen the bright side of it here. Sydney FC playing out at Leichhardt Stadium for the second time this season, had just over 10,000, which I appreciate is slightly under probably their average. But when you look at, atmosphere and culture and vibe and having a day out at the football and creating the atmosphere that we want for the A-League, it was way over whatever they get at Sydney Football Stadium outside of derbies and big blues. And then Brisbane Roar also forced out of Suncorp Stadium. Not a bad thing. It means they have an excuse to go down or up to the Sunshine Coast and play up there in front of 7,000. Don't forget, this is the venue where they got 6,000 pre-season as well. I don't know if I've heard any club getting that many
said this
fans.
was a record attendance for them, the highest attendance since round one of last season.
Really?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
this game at Sunshine Coast, which is, I mean,
There you
number
go.
one, puts everything into perspective of just how poor the crowds have been in Brisbane, but also, you don't need a massive crowd, right, for it to be an awesome atmosphere and a great vibe, which is what we saw.
Absolutely. And look, I know we have big things about crowds, but when it comes to atmosphere in the stadium, it was just elite. I think every time I turn onto a Brisbane game at Suncorp, it's just sad. Like, it just is. I know they close off the far side. They have everyone on the near side, and you see a lot of open bays. It's just sad. You're not going to get those casual sports-going fans turning up to Raw games if they're sitting in an empty cavern like Suncorp Stadium, but they are going to go have a day out with the family down at the Sunshine Coast for a game like this. So I thought it was extraordinary. Again, they can't play there every week. We saw the issues that the Raw had when they left Suncorp a couple of years ago. Going so far out of Brisbane is not consistent. You are going to lose your core fan base. I know it's a very similar argument for City down at Casey Deck, but having the excuse to do that shows the best of what I think the A-League can be. And when you think about Perry Park and the saga that we've gone through in the past 2 years, that is the venue. That is the venue that Raw is still pushing for. There's lots happening still behind the scenes, I know, in terms of trying to get something done. We have the Brisbane Roar women's team play there on occasion as well. It really is the home of football in Queensland. Get the Brisbane Roar into Perry Park. And I know this is a conversation that's dragged on, but it's one that we can't afford to kind of drop out in front of mind of football in Australia. And then you look at Sydney, Deck, and I think, I don't know, apart from big blues and derbies, why could not Sydney play there every week? I understand there are issues with it in terms of transport, in terms of some of the facilities available. I get that. But we have to think about the trade-offs, right? Nothing is perfect. And for the atmosphere they created, we actually are going to see a big blue played there in a couple of weeks' time. So that's going to be an excellent marker. But there's, what, $40 or $50 million worth of upgrades coming to Leichhardt in the next few years, thanks to the West Tigers as well, playing in the NRL. I think this looks ready-made for a team like Sydney FC to play a lot of their home games.
Yeah. I think, like you said, when you're talking about clubs like Brisbane or City playing so far away from home, it's like the deterrent and the main reason not to is, you alienate a lot of the existing fan base. But like you said, for Sydney at Leichhardt, that doesn't really exist. Like, whenever they play there, they get those numbers, which is a real a real positive. Like I said, I'd love to hear a Sydney fan's perspective because I could be totally wrong, but you turn it on, you see a full pack. Like 10,000 at Leichhardt looks infinitely better than 15,000 at Sydney Football Stadium, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And for the neutral, like it's the eye test, and I know that we shouldn't necessarily be basing all of our opinions on unlike what neutral fans think or what other fans think, but it does matter, like if you're scrolling across the league and you turn the game on and you see a packed stadium, you think, oh, it matters. Like, this must matter. Let me
even someone scrolling on a TikTok from one of the goals in the middle of the week.
100%. You don't instantly think, oh, Leichhardt only holds 10,000, so I'm going to think that blah, 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 and this percentage of the crowd, you go, oh, this is really cool. So 100%, like, we want to see bumps on seats and we want to see nearly capacity crowds, and even if it's just an illusion of it's a smaller venue, but that's what it is. You look across Europe and you've got teams that have 40,000 seat stadiums and you've got teams that have 10,000 seat stadiums, which is built for the capacity, but the thing is the atmosphere. So I agree with you. If that's something that Sydney can do more often, like you said, maybe they do half, whatever it is, but if they can find a way to play there on a more consistent basis in a way that keeps the fans feeling connected and doesn't alienate those existing fans and, is sustainable, then I'd love to see it happen because it is really awesome. And like you said, I look forward to seeing the Big Blue there because Victory will travel well for that game, and they always do. So that's probably something we haven't really seen at Leichhardt yet is a really banging and thriving away end. So that'd be really awesome, and I can't wait to see that.
Yes, that game is going to be pumping. So 10K at this one on the weekend against Macarthur. My understanding the capacity of Leichhardt is around 20,000. So you'd imagine they'd be in the 15 to maybe 18
and that would
bracket
be with opening all the hills as well and stuff, right? So
yeah, and I know it's a very Australian thing, right? But how good's a hill?
Yeah,
it is very family orientated, and talk whatever about the kind of vibe you want to present. But it was elite, Jacob, and maybe you can take more of the Brisbane angle because this is an ongoing saga. We are going to have to turn on in a couple of weeks and see them back at Suncorp. This is a long-term thing behind the scenes, but it just shows what the A-League can look like when we are playing in right-sized stadiums.
And I think there's another thing to it as well. And I don't know, maybe this is just a me thing. Maybe it's a placebo or something. But Sydney Football Stadium is a fantastic venue. Obviously, we were there for Unite Round last season, Lachie. Awesome stadium. Like, just really, really cool. Flash new. Everything's modern and clean. And it just feels proper. But it just... I don't know, it just lacked something, right? It just was like...
fans, apart from the Sydney derby.
Yes, but also it just is like... It just feels too nice. I don't know, maybe, like I say, maybe this is just me that feels this way, but there's something about like a slightly older, smaller ground that just it brings its own vibe. Leave alone the fact that, the crowd looks bigger in those kind of grounds. It just has its own vibe as well. And you kind of feel that when you're going to those grounds. And, I think that kind of helps the atmosphere out a little bit. I don't know, like I said, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe that is just me that feels that way. But sometimes having those big, shiny, brand new stadiums, it's all well and good, but, it kind of loses a little bit of the feeling. But in terms of Brisbane, playing out at Sunshine Coast, like you said, they managed to get a very, very good crowd out there for pre-season. And it's something that we kind of touched on a little bit leading into the season with regards to, there's a lot of hype around this Brisbane Roar team. And I think it shows that there is that hype there, right? There is a fan base for this team that we've not seen in recent years because, simply put, Suncorp isn't fit for purpose for them. The only thing that Suncorp really has going for it is that it's in a very good location and it's very easy to get to with good transport links. Like, yeah, you want that from a stadium, but it's also, 5 times too big for what is needed. I think, sure, State of Origin probably sells the place out, but is there anywhere... football definitely doesn't. Do the Broncos get close? Do you reckon? I don't know. I don't pay enough attention to that, but like it just feels it feels like it's this massive thing that gets filled, maybe not enough to justify it. But Perry Park, yeah, we've seen huge campaigns over the last few years, especially with the build up towards the Olympics of let's get Perry Park to be the Leichhardt of Brisbane, right? Where it's like it's this kind of smaller rectangular ground that can accommodate these teams like a Brisbane Roar, as well as some of the local teams in their bigger matches come, the Australia Cup or the Championship and things like that, right? But yeah, we just kind of, it felt like for a while maybe we were making steps in the right direction. There was that unified like memorandum of understanding thing put out, right, between basically all the interested parties with like Football Australia and the APL and everybody, putting their name on it. But yeah, I don't know what the recent developments have been. I feel like it's been a bit quiet, but it would be perfect, right? It just feels like a match made in heaven. It's already in a very good spot. It's just a bit too small and a bit too old. But it's got all the bones there. And, when we have seen it used in the Australia Cup in the past, it has been a good atmosphere, and it's been it looks very, very good, on broadcast. I've not been there in person, so I can't comment on that side of things, but it does seem like it's a good option. So yeah, the fact that we're continually having this conversation, it just feels like it's such a simple solution, right? But there's always other things at play that other things that governments think are more important to invest the money into, I suppose. So that's where you get the problem. But it feels like it's so easy. The solution is right there. It's not like you have to break ground and build something new like Western United tried, right? There's a venue there, you've just got to upgrade it and update it, and we're still kind of having this conversation about when are they going to do it. It's a bit disappointing.
Yeah, so Brisbane Roar have said that they're willing to commit money to it, but obviously that just goes to a certain end, right? Like for them, they're paying the rent for Suncorp, so if you do the maths out for a few years, it does actually make sense for them to invest a lot of money in the redevelopment, because over the long term that will pay off for them. But yeah, things are ticking behind the scenes. Work is being done, but we'll have to see what comes of it. And you talk about the hype around the Roar as well. I think it's great that was rewarded on the field.
Yeah,
because this was clearly the best performance. I thought they played Newcastle off the park in this game. They were really, really good. Lucas Harrington getting the goal off the corner. I found it hilarious how who was it? Was Vracus the one that lost his boot?
I think so, yeah.
The replay was so odd. It just looked like, I think Robbie Thompson said on commentary, he just like stepped out of it. Like there was no trip, there was no opposition player catching the boot. He just took a step and his shoe stayed behind. And then he ends up crossing it with his sock foot on the left to get in. And then has a go at Ali Razor, who was another part of that game as well, the back and forth. But then goes and takes the corner to get Harrington his first goal. And then they go on and make it 3. Quinn McNichol with a nice shot into the unfortunate back of Delianov to make it 3 in the end. And then Sydney FC as well, they look solid. Rough in the opening week, but since then they've really stabilised and they look a pretty good outfit heading into the Big Blue in 2 weeks' time. But when we're talking about atmospheres and stadiums, and Decky made the comparison between 10K at Leichhardt and 15K at Sydney Football Stadium. Well, I think 10K at Leichhardt looked a hell of a lot better than 18,000 at Amy Park, to be fair, for the Melbourne Derby. We know there's issues going on with the North Terrace, so there wasn't a lot of noise in there either. I'm sure the rain and the weather turns people away as well. And the football on itself was such a unique story. You coined them the Rugrats of City. All the young kids, it's already a young team. And then when Nathaniel Atkinson goes off, it gets even younger. They got a 16-year-old and a player who has less match minutes this season than the 16-year-old playing at the 2 fullback positions. But somehow City got it done again.
Yeah, I would love to see Kutlash's birth certificate, because he does not look 16, but I take the club's word for it. Yeah, I think it was just one of those games. Like, I went in thinking, and I spoke about it on X, I thought that it was a bigger picture for City this week. I thought that with the Champions League and all things considered, like me as a fan, I wasn't, of course, I always want to win derbies, who doesn't, but I wasn't too fussed on the result, because, like the guys were going to be missing, especially when the teams dropped and Beige didn't get back and Lecky didn't get back and things like that. I was like, okay, this is going to be tough. And to be honest, like it was tough. The result says a 2-0, but it didn't feel like a 2-0. I think that it was almost one of those nights where everything that could have gone right for City, apart from Nate going down, went right, and then everything that could have gone wrong for Victory almost did. I think that in a game like that, in the way the game was going to shape out, that we were always going to defend, going to have to dig in a lot, and then the more open the game would get, then the harder it would be for us. So for us to score within a minute. Like that just fell right into our hands because it's like it gives you something to defend. How that happens for victory, I don't know. I think that, it's like anything in a derby, right? You got to start well, and that kind of just fell asleep there and almost gifted. So, um, that goal, and then it was just didn't really go in for them. I thought, like Matter was great. He's kind of one of those players where he shows that if they can keep him fit, it doesn't matter how old you are. He's almost just like Lachie as well, type of thing. Is that these guys have that much quality that they can almost just play in slow motion. And he did what he wanted. But yeah, like I said, it was good for us. I thought it was really pleasingly for City that I thought we defended really well. Like Victory still earned a lot of good chances and stuff like that. But when we needed, it was like dog defending. We threw bodies in the way, and we got stuck in and did all those right things. And then was still attacking enough to go forward. And then, put the second, which almost kind of felt like it put the game to bed a little bit, and kind of took the pressure off a little bit. So all those things I'm really happy with. But when we're talking about the young kids, I've never been happier for an international break. because while I love having the young kids, like it is a serious problem, and I don't know if it's really noticed amongst like other fans in the league, but what is happening with City's physio, like I don't get it. I think we've got that many soft tissue. Oh man, that many soft tissue injuries, like 4 or 5 weeks into a year, and it's like Nate, I get because he's had to back up after back up after back up. But that's a concern now, right? Is that because we've got no ability to rotate? These guys are just having to back up. Like the question is, I said to a mate last night, I think we've scored 5 goals this year. 4 have been from Max Caputo. So like if Caputo goes down, what do we do, right? And that's a very real problem. So I'm enjoying it while it lasts, but also. And it's great to see that these academy kids are, because we talk about it a lot in the A-League, is that, especially now the state of the league and the money and stuff, is that, we want to bleed young talent, but I also feel like the benefit of having, and we see it in Sydney, we see it over the last couple of years in Central Coast, and we see it in City, is that it's not just about like, getting life into young talent, but when you do it properly and you have those good academy structures, it is really rewarded. I think last night I think City posted it today, we had 16 academy graduates take the field last night, and it's something the fans love looking at, and you can really get behind because they feel like your own, because they are your own. So as good as it is, it's also a problem, and it's not sustainable. So I'd love to have a chat with the City physio and see what's going on, but for as long as it is, enjoy it for what it is, and hopefully we get a couple guys back over the international break. But no, I was really proud of him last night.
Over the last kind of like year and a half now, I've followed City very closely, as we've, grown this podcast more and more. And I'm of the firm belief, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this as well as a fan. I think the biggest advantage you get from being a part of the City Football Group is the intellectual property of the academy structures, the coaching plans, the development plans, how to actually coach kids to play football and develop them into footballers. I think it would be a breath of fresh air and completely eye-opening to go and watch a week of academy training at City and then a different A-League club and count all the differences you see, because having that knowledge of international top-level European academies, learning those lessons for 20, 30 years, and then dumping that in a new club in Australia where no one's really taken over the kind of academy scene, I think it'd be fascinating to be able to do that so quickly and have all the expertise in one place. The last 18 months have just proven it, how good you guys can just spit out young talent.
Yeah, I think, and I was saying this to a Victory fan on the way out last night as well. He like stopped me for a chat. I think the thing we're noticing now is, like you said, the first couple of years when we start the academy, because you have to field players, you kind of have to pull players from other clubs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But what you're getting now is, like players who have been in this system from like 11, 12 years old, and last night was a perfect example of it, is that this is how we play, right? And whether it's under 11s or whether it's the first team, that this is the identity we want you to play at this club. So when you see it last night, when Pete Antonio comes on, for like his, third game and, could have left you at left back. It's probably so daunting for them stepping into a derby, but it's the game plan's not different, right? They know what to do. They know what the passes are. They know what the lines are. They know the identity of the club. So after you kind of get over that probably shell shock of like 5 minutes, it's like, okay, I actually know what I'm doing here, and they can really step into that role and flourish. And I suppose, like what you said, is it also increases the chance of when they inevitably do go, because we are a feeder club. Every A-League club's a feeder club, but when they go over to Europe, it gives them the best chance of succeeding because they're used to playing, like good quality football. Obviously not at that level, but, it's not foreign to them to, want to play and want to be really, aggressive and positive with their football. And I think that's when the likes would see, like, Tilio's doing a lot better in his second time over. Geordie Boss is flourishing. Connor Metcalf's really flourishing, and those sorts of kids are really doing well overseas. So, and it's something that more clubs can do. Like if lack of money and lack of buying, massive players isn't necessarily a bad thing, because what we're seeing is that if you, even Adelaide have had so many good players, and, Sydney and stuff like that, is that if you put time into these kids, then their stories there, and they can really, really do well. So I completely agree. I think if more clubs can get onto it, which I think they are, I think there's not really an A-League club right now who isn't really trying to get stuff moving with young talent, because they have to, just with the financial landscape of the league. But I think City is a testament to the fact, and obviously we have a lot better resource than other clubs with a financial standpoint. But if you do it properly, then it can be rewarded, and it can be a really good thing.
Jacob, on a Melbourne Victory perspective, we've talked a little bit over the first kind of month of the season now about coaches that are under pressure. I think Dillis definitely is one of them. I don't think there's a whole lot more he could have done. I think Deck was right in his assessment that Victory were actually really good at points in this game. Juan Mata was pulling the strings in his first 90 minutes for a few years. I saw someone bring it up on Twitter. So he actually, maybe the fact that the international break was coming up, we're just like, oh yeah, we're just going to run him out. He's got 2 weeks to recover. But he was pulling the strings. They had chances. I still do not know how Patrick Beach managed to save that shot off Grimaldi.
That's incredible.
The outside of the foot. I actually think I had a perfect angle of this. I reckon he got a little bit lucky, and maybe this is over exaggeration. I reckon because he was unsighted at the shot. There was a defender standing in the middle. I think it was Ferreira, and he didn't see the ball off the boot. So I reckon if he sees the initial line, he actually takes another step to his right, and then maybe can't get back to his left when the ball curves the other way. But just to flick the hand up like he did was incredible. And there was chances. Matter at the far post late on as well. Like Victory should have scored goals. They won the XG count. They won the chance count. So look, I don't know if you can put a lot of blame on Dillis. He's obviously one who we're looking at week to week now. So I feel like any criticism is probably heightened as well. But it is 1 win in 4, and the win is Perth Glory. And as we're going to get to later, beating Perth Glory doesn't seem too hard at the moment.
Yeah, it's a difficult situation for Victory, and Deck and I were talking about this before we hit record, where it's like, this is a Victory team that they made the final last season after a tremendous performance in the semi-finals against Auckland. They've got what looks to be on paper a very, very good squad with a coach who, like I said, last season leads them to a grand final. Like, it kind of feels like it should all be in place for them, and yet they're just not finding those results. And this performance in particular, echoed the game earlier in the day with the Phoenix, and the fact that you could argue the Phoenix, obviously, they had more possession, they had decent chance creation, and the big difference being that Auckland actually beat them on XG. But with those, with the goals Auckland scored, that's not surprising, right? They were very, very high XG chances, but it kind of felt, Wellington will be annoyed that they didn't get something from that. And Victory, similarly here, I think, like you said, they played well enough to have done it, but it goes back to what Deck said earlier, where it's like everything that could have gone right for City went right. And I think the way that the game started as well kind of enabled that to happen, where Victory's then chasing the game for 90 minutes, because, it just a lapse of concentration in defence, where the two centre-backs just kind of spread apart and both step wide, and it just leaves just a channel for Max Caputo to run through. And there's screenshots floating around on like Twitter and stuff of it, and it's like he's just standing there with like 5 meters either side of him before there's any defenders. It's like, well, you can't afford to do that, but it's a derby, so you kind of get caught up in things, and you maybe not settled into the game yet, and those kind of mistakes can creep in. So
yeah, if I can jump on that goal specifically, I'm a little bit worried about Roderick Miranda.
Yeah.
He was injured to start the season and he's come back in place of Seb Esposito. I think he's very slow to recognise the turnover and get back in position for that goal. And his gap is how Caputo is allowed in behind. And I know he's the captain of the football club, but I think this question is Dilla spoke pre-game and talked about how important he was to the team. And I'm just not sure, to be honest. So I'm just flagging that. And I think for me, as someone who really values leadership traits in leaders rather than are you a good footballer, when those goals went in, it's so clear to see Roderick Miranda, as well as 9 of his mates in the team, have their hands on their hips, doing a full teapot and just waiting for the balls to reset. And Jason Davidson is the only one going around to players, clapping his hands, trying to motivate the team
fired up,
to get back in it. And I don't know, I think he had the armband for the first couple of games. He looks like a natural leader to me. He's the one I would have chosen. So I
how
think
crazy is that though, right? That there's one guy out there that's fired up for this match, and whereas with City, it's like everyone is in on it, right? They want this win. Maybe it does help, right, that there's that youthful indiscretion on City's side where they're like, we've grown up watching this game and now we're out here playing it, we're going to give it our all. Whereas with Victory, it kind of, the squad, average age kind of skews a little bit older. Maybe it's kind of lost that fire for some of them. I don't know. But yeah, that's an interesting point. I didn't actually pick that up watching it on TV. But yeah, the fact that there's only one guy that's going around actually trying to motivate everyone is a little bit of a worrying sign, perhaps, for the Victory, that they lack that kind of structured leadership, right? Where it's not just dependent on one guy to do it. You want kind of almost a leader in every area of the pitch. And you want, if it's not a strong goalkeeper, you want a really strong defender who's going to be the guy that's going to get everybody up and organise things. You want somebody in midfield who's going to be vocal and kind of control that area of the pitch. And then you want somebody up front who's the guy you look to, right, when things are tough and you need a bit of inspiration. And yeah, maybe that's just where Victory's lost it a little bit this season, is that they're very heavily reliant on whoever is captain that week, right, to be the guy to lead the team, whereas like it's actually sometimes you need it to be a collective effort, especially in these big games. I'm just flagging as you, and again, this is 90 minutes on a Saturday in the game that they were losing for most of it, right? So most of what's important about being a captain goes on during the week, which we don't get to see. So who knows? The coaches and the coaching staff are always the best place to make those decisions. But when we do talk about coaches under pressure, my argument that I'm going to put forth to you guys tonight is that Alan Stajic is now at the top of that list in terms of coaches with their jobs under threat. I don't think losing to Adelaide at Cooper's on a Friday night is particularly shameful, but when we put it in the context of this season, 0 wins from 4 games now, the only team along with Perth to not have won a game this A-League season. And we've talked about the tough run in terms of Victory they've had to start, but it is clear that the fan base deck is frustrated at what's happening. And it's not just the results. They don't like the way the team is playing. And obviously that is an argument that switches off when you win 12 in a row or unbeaten in 12 like they did at the end of last season. And again, very similar to what I said about Diller's. Krayev has 2 lovely chances, which he probably should score both. Definitely the first one, right? That first one in particular was just woeful. He had so much of the goal to shoot at and he hit it straight at the keeper. That was a bad one.
He scores that, they're 1-0 up, and then who knows what happens. Football is a fickle game, right? But undeniably, there is pressure coming off Staj after the international break, especially when you're considering the second game after that break is the Sydney Derby.
Yeah, and I reckon that could very well be his last chance. Because I think, if they are going to sack him, there's probably two managers out there at the moment who are probably league experienced, and that's Aloisi and Cosnovo, who are potentially there. And it's like if they leave it too long and one of those two or both of those two get snapped up elsewhere, and if rumours are true that PK is pretty close to moving to Perth, then that's a big problem. And I think out of those two, if they're probably the two hottest managers in the market at the moment, PK fits Wanderers. Like he's a hard ass. He will instill culture and stuff like that, probably more so than Aloisi. And I think that let's call a spade a spade. Like Crave has his burnt stage. Like so there's two chances. It's like but it's like it's ifs and buts, and I get that, but it's also other things. Like if he scores those two early goals, or at least one of those early goals, then it changes the complexion of the game, and and the thing and stuff. But the fact is, he misses them, right? And you got to move on. And it's like, after that, they give up that first goal, and like you were saying, quite similar to what you're seeing in victory. The response is pretty poor. It's like the players, they look frustrated, they look devoid of ideas, and then Goodwin, that second goal, that's too easy for me, I think. And I think that response, by then it's 2-0. And the fact is that club, it's an interesting club because the expectations are so high, and they should be so high because they're such a well followed club and they've got so many good players there. But it's almost like consistently year after year, it just feels like they're just underperforming for what they should be, for what they can be, and for probably what those fans deserve, because they've got some of the best fans in the league. And I think for him, it was, for both of them, for Adelaide and Wanderers, it was a real do or die game for both of them, and they both needed that massive win. It probably changes the perspective a little bit on Adelaide now. And they probably get a bit more respect and a bit more time to move forward and a bit more grace from the fans. But Wanderers, it's like, it's tough to go into a Sydney derby. I don't know whose home game it is.
Question. Keep talking, I'll find out.
Yeah, but to go into a Sydney derby with a much improved Sydney who look like they're just getting better and better, to come in and it's a massive test. And I think that if they lose that, and like that's the thing now, I don't even think a point's good enough for the expectation.
Wanderers home game.
Okay, so that works in their favour. But again, with a ever growing frustrated fan base and players by the looks of it, I don't necessarily think a point's good enough in that game, so they need to win. And if they don't win, I reckon, like we already said, he's under massive pressure, but I reckon if they don't win, then time could be up. So, he's got the international break to sort him out. But, really, really disappointing for the Wanderers fans and the club to 2-0 there. No good.
Jacob, you've seen Adelaide have a great start to the season not too long ago, and, somewhat drop off after that good start to the season. Are you convinced yet in terms of what you're seeing to turn that into sustained success across the course of a season? Ethan Alagich, again, great. Yaya DeCooley, Goodwin's now off the mark again in his latest stint in Adelaide. These are good signs.
It's weird. There's it's a muted positivity, I suppose, amongst Adelaide fans, where there's a feeling that it's maybe a little bit more stable than the last couple of seasons under Carl Viet, in terms of there's a baseline of performance we can expect from this team, and it's maybe not as low as it was under Viet, right? Where it's, like losing to Perth 5-0 or whatever it was. Like, it's kind of, the standards seem a little bit higher this season, but it feels like the ceiling isn't as high, right? It's a smaller operating window. So that's why there's been so many tight games for the club this season, right? It's 3-2-1s. Obviously, you've won one of them, been on the receiving end of the other two, and then a 2-0 against the Wanderers. It kind of feels like it's this very tight operating window for the club where, they kind of feel a little bit more solid at times. But, there's still a lack in the final third, I think, of real, just prudent finishing, which is what the club had, obviously, with Archie Goodwin last season. Take nothing away from Luka Jovanovic's goal, though, in this one. Another fantastic kind of... And this is the thing that I've seen with Jovanovic over the years, is he's not that kind of just like a poacher, right? Where he's just going to be in the right spot and just tap it in the back of the net. You know, some of the best strikers of all time have been a poacher, but he's not that kind of guy. He's the kind of guy who wants the ball at his feet in those kind of tight contested areas, and he makes his own space and gets a shot off. And it's what we saw against Auckland. It's what we saw on Friday night against the Wanderers, and it's what, you know, Adelaide fans have seen for him from him, you know, for both the senior and the youth sides over the years as well. So, you know, I feel like they're starting to figure that out now, and they're getting him into those positions a bit more often. But yeah, it's I wouldn't say that anybody in Adelaide is still overly optimistic that things are going to be great this season. The last two fixtures, the MacArthur loss and the loss to, gosh, now I can't remember who it was, the other one. But both of those, it kind of felt like, maybe you should get a point from those games, right? So there is still a case of, it feels like the true potential of this team still hasn't been realised, which I think is kind of, you know, an interesting thing. There's still a couple of key omissions from the squad to import players in Julian Quaital and Anselmo are still yet to even take the pitch for the club. This now being round 4, heading into round 5. Anselmo, by all accounts, won't be ready for still another few weeks. So there's a lot of frustration over that and the recruitment again this season. But yeah, the ceiling perhaps is a little bit lower, but it's still not been reached for this club, I think, so far this season. So, you know, I like what Deck said earlier, where he said this result perhaps has changed the perspective on Adelaide United so far this season, where, you know, you've got 6 points from 4 games. It's kind of a decent start, you know, especially considering you've beaten Sydney and Western Sydney, 2 teams that you know, a lot of people are kind of expecting to be near the top of the table come the end of the season, or at least that's the expectation. But, you know, it feels like there's just these consistency issues. Didn't concede from a set piece, which was a good thing to see. And Ed and Andrioli was saying post-match as well, you know, it's all well and good, right, to get a win at home in front of a great crowd and things like that. But the absolute best thing is keeping a clean sheet, because it's just been such a rarity for the club over the last few seasons. He's like, that's a really good sign to me that, you know, we're trending in the right direction, right? Like for the last 10 minutes or so, the Wanderers had a lot of the ball and were really pushing hard to try and get one goal back, and they couldn't do it. Whereas with Sydney in round 1, right, they kind of managed to get that back, and it made things difficult towards the end. So, you know, that didn't happen. Got the clean sheet. That's a really, really good sign. And I think, you know, Joshua Smith's had a great game between the sticks as well. I mean, he wasn't called upon all that frequently, but he didn't make any mistakes. He made saves when he had to. And the back line as a whole, I think in possession there's still some work to do, but out of possession they look a lot better than they did last season. So there's definite positives from this Adelaide side. But I mean, then you go and look at the likes of an Auckland and the way that they perform, and you can see there's still a big step to make to get to that kind of upper echelon this season.
Well, when it comes to, you know, assessing clubs and perhaps changing our opinions now that we're about a month in, I don't know where else to go with Perth Glory at the moment. If you can't beat the Mariners at home, then I'm losing a lot of trust that you can do a lot more. Obviously, we can't judge them too much until they get their next permanent coach, which, Deck, as you say, the strong male is Patrick Usnorbo. But, you know, there's other options out there as well. And if another job does open up, then obviously that kind of flips that market on its head. But this was the interim off over in Perth on Friday night. You got Warren Moon over at the Mariners as well, who get there somehow. The Mariners are a team with 2 wins to start in the first 4 games of the season. You know, Andrew Redmayne was big again. He's had a really good start to life back on the coast. Penalty save in the F3, man of the match against Wellington to earn a point, and then another good one here. And then Brantman with his bomb. Are you reading too much, Deck, into these teams? They're in transition. They're both between coaches. Whatever happens while they have these interims is not going to be any consistent marker of what's going to happen for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think, you know, Perth have still got Tom Lawrence to come in, which I think will help their attacking just, I suppose, play and ball movement and stuff a lot, because that's the thing about Perth, you know, like I remember I said pre-season, I actually looked at them and I tipped them to be quite maybe a sneaky, you know, like not going to win the league, but do all right, because if you look at them on their list, you know, they've got Taggart, they've got Lawrence, they've got Kaltak, like what's happened there, they've got Risdon, They've got O'Neill, like they've got enough. I think they've got enough to be a lot better than what they are, and I think that you're right in the grand scheme of things until they get a proper manager in, like in terms of the context of their season, this won't mean a hell of a lot. But I think, we heard it again, we talk about it a lot, but like the mentality aside and what kind of damage that can do when it comes to it, almost, I think the question for Perth is that when this new manager comes in, how much damage is he going to have to repair, right?
Yeah.
In terms of tactics, in terms of mentality, like, Sutton, I think it was last week, when Perth played City, or a couple of weeks, and I think it was last week, a couple of weeks ago anyway, but, Schreiber's hit one uncontested from long, smacked it in, and then Romani does it, and then, Bruntman does the exact same thing for Central Coast, and you actually heard the mic pick it up. Sutton screams at the top of his lungs every time, like that's what he screamed, and it's like, it's like the one thing that Perth probably know is like, don't let wingers cut back inside and take free shots, and they did the exact same thing, and it cost them a win. So, it felt like a case of when it rains, it really pours for Perth, and I feel for, but it's, I think that's the question, is that when this manager comes in, how much damage are they going to have to repair, because it looks pretty bleak for them at the moment. Like I said, I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I do think they have, like I said, probably a fair bit of quality in that squad, arguably more than others. And, like I said, if you can get them ticking, Taggart's probably one of the best strikers in the league. So if you can find a way to get him in those good scoring opportunities, which, like I said, I think Tom Lawrence will help. If you can find a way to shore up the defence, I think there is a really competitive element there. But if the mentality gets too much of a whack, that could be all she wrote, especially we know that in the A-League as well, when there's no real punishment for losing other than pride and things like that. So it definitely one to watch for sure.
I'm a little bit worried about Tom Lawrence. I don't know. Visa player at Perth Glory, forward from the UK, comes back from injury, plays 45 minutes, then goes out again the next week. I'm getting Daniel Sturridge vibes. It's just coming in a little bit. I hope I'm wrong, but we'll have to see. On the Mariners, Jacob, we haven't really touched on a lot of them, since they lost. God, I've forgotten his name. It hasn't been that long.
Mark Jackson?
Mark Jackson, yeah. God, thank you. Jeez,
it's been a long weekend.
Yeah. Since they lost him, we haven't really talked about them too much. Did this game give you positive indications? Because obviously, you're judging the players, right?
Yeah, and it's against Perth.
Yeah.
If you're looking for a chance to get a result, there's a pretty good one. They're putting together a sneaky good season, though. Of course, they got that win over the Jets in round one in the F3, which now maybe in hindsight shouldn't be as shocking a result, right? The Jets have the wheels have fallen off a little bit in recent weeks, and maybe this chance to get a week's break is going to help reset them a bit. But no, the Mariners have put together an okay season to start things out so far, considering that the expectations were they are going to finish bottom and nobody is going to get close to competing for that title. The fact that they're now on 7 points off of 4 games, sitting pretty in, I think, fifth or fourth, fifth spot. That's a very, very good start to the season. So, I think that arguably potentially even more than Perth, perhaps there's something there for the Mariners in terms of what you have to work with as a coach. And still the verdict's out on who's going to be exactly the person that's going to be the one to step up into that role, but they're already putting good performances, on the board under an interim coach in Warren Moon, and you kind of feel like maybe they're going to be the Perth this season, right? We all thought Perth were going to be the Perth this season, where they're going to be the ones that are maybe fighting for the 6 come the end, but could be the Mariners. And I do like what I've seen from them. I don't take too much from this game, a 1-0 over Perth, but I think just continuing to get those results and build that confidence, I think that's really going to help whoever does come into that role, to go, right, we've got a really good base to work with already. Let's just keep going and keep turning over and getting these wins over teams that we think are manageable, and staying pretty tight and true to ourselves against stronger opposition. And, it could serve them well over the rest of the season.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I share your complete enthusiasm. I think there is some obviously like circumstance as well. Like you got Perth, and then the way they won the F3 was so crazy. Redmayne saving
But
going
it's
down
a derby,
there.
right? So it's one of those ones where you just take the win. Like
It is,
everything goes out the window.
Winning games helps confidence for sure.
Yeah.
So the fact that they've won 2 games, they're in a better place than if they hadn't won 2 games and played well. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
good on them. And you brought up the Jets, and I should have brought this up earlier when we were talking about their game against Brisbane. I think the worst case scenario I gave in the lead up to this week was that they get smashed by the Raw, and that's come true. And look, 3-0, maybe it's not smashed, whatever. But I think the way they moved the ball in the final third gives me a little concern, because in the cup final and in the first couple of weeks of the season, especially when they played against Victory, the way their forwards would act when they were receiving the ball, it's almost like all the front three, all the potential passes from the midfielder, they're expecting it. They're like, oh, if I get the ball, it's going to come in this lane. I need to make this touch, and then I'll be in behind. And the idea of Milligan's football is to take those risks in that position, because if it comes off, it's a goal or a very good shot on target, right? We're not trying to get low percentage shots. We're trying to play interesting, unique, creative passes to allow those high percentage opportunities. But in this game, it felt like when the ball was coming to the feet of a Dobson or a Burgess or a Battleado, they were just on their heels a little bit. It didn't seem like they were expecting the ball to come to them.
It was weird, wasn't it? Like
it was strange. And I think that just comes back to what we were talking with the Phoenix about the players having belief in what you're doing.
Yeah.
If they were up at like the Victory, they're expecting that ball to come for them, and they're already shaping up for that half turn to lead themselves into space. But they weren't doing that on Sunday against the Raw.
And
so
I think part of it could be right though, copping 2 big defeats in a row to the Victory in Sydney, and maybe in your mind,
Victory, right?
Oh yeah, no, yeah. My apologies, they did beat Victory,
but Sydney
still,
Raw, yes,
yeah, but still copping a big defeat to the hands of Sydney. You kind of go, right, maybe we need to just focus on being a little bit more, I suppose, cautious and conservative in our approach, so we don't concede 4 again. And you know,
and that maybe that's what the players are thinking, right? But it's not what Milligan's thinking.
Exactly. There's that mix up between, you know, because players are. They're not robots, or at least they shouldn't be, right? Like they should be able to approach a game in a manner that they think fits, but still within the system that they should be playing. And there's clearly a little bit of disconnect there. And maybe, again, that comes back to it being a young squad where they're maybe a little bit more, you know, they've got that kind of crazy self-belief being so young, stepping into a professional footballing environment going, I'm going to play the way I want to play a little bit, and that kind of self-doubt creeps in then when you cop a big loss and you go, right, well, maybe let's just dial it back a bit this week. And Milligan doesn't want that, but you can't help that because subconsciously that's what the players are thinking. So,
yeah, fascinating story. All right, there's your A-League debrief for round 4. Of course, we're heading into an international break now. If you want to go check out the YouTube, we had our instant reaction to the Socceroos squad that dropped on Friday morning. A very different squad, it must be said, from Tony Popovic. I haven't checked the exact fixture, but I'm pretty sure Graham Arnold's 5th phase of World Cup qualification with Iraq is going on in the next week or so as well. So that's coming up from an Australian context. The Matildas aren't too far. Oh, their next games are towards the end of the month now. But we've got lots of football coming your way, obviously. But that will do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. Thank you very much for your company. Declan Archer on debut. Thank you very much, mate. It was an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, mate. Love being on. Love chatting football. Especially after a derby win. Hopefully more of that to come. But yeah, happy to be a part of it. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you scoring out some time. I know it was probably a big night for you last night, so go off and get some sleep now. Jacob Stevens.
Well, that's more commitment than I had last season. I'm pretty sure after the original rivalry last season, and I got home and I was like, I'm not doing the recording this week. You
had to travel as well.
I did have to travel, but yeah, I mean, it's only 90 minutes. It's not that bad, but it was, that's commitment. I love that.
Very nice. All right. Thank you to everyone listening at home. We appreciate your company. As always, we've got a one-on-one interview that I did with Vince Rugari during the week, dropping on Wednesday for your viewing pleasure, and then more Socceroos content on the Friday leading into the game against Venezuela on Saturday afternoon, 1 p.m. A very nice time for an overseas Socceroos game. So enjoy your football, enjoy everything else going on, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.